short, sharp conversation that looks at what progress have we made. With that in mind, Madam Mabuza, let me start the conversation with you. We heard Madam Mahanyele Dabengo saying Africa takes center stage. The theme this year is BRICS in Africa. The question to you is, how has BRICS unlocked trade and investment opportunities for Africa within the bloc? And perhaps you might like to comment on the role of South Africa in facilitating these opportunities.
Nozipho, thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope I'm audible. So first of all, the opportunity ahead is actually much bigger. That's why this conversation here at the moment is very important. So in terms of where we've come from, in 2000, I was looking at the statistics, the BRIC nations, so excluding South Africa, of course, joined in 2010 and attended our first summit in 2011. In 2000, BRIC accounted for 7% of global trade.
Right.
You did hear from Puti at the moment, BRICS accounts for going on to 30% of global trade. Intra-BRICS trade has grown by, in the past 10 years, an average annual rate of 7% or over 7%. These are very compelling numbers. However, for me, the even more important success of the BRICS formation, especially over the past 10 years, has been that we have now created a model for the world that moves us away from an extractive approach in terms of economic engagement towards a collaborative approach where we can all benefit. And why this is important for the African continent, we have the resources in abundance still in our continent, be it the human capital in terms of the youth that we have, be it in terms of the mineral resources or other natural resources. The next wave of global growth will, in my mind, Nozipho, come from this continent. And it is thus important that we are sitting here today inviting our BRIC partners, because we see that they accept, they understand the multilateral approach where there is mutual respect, where we're all working towards a win-win outcome. And we're inviting them to come and participate in the industrialization of this continent, because this is where the world needs to see the next wave of global growth.
Madam, thank you very much. And what you've done for us is you've put a marker on the board and you've said the next wave of global growth will come from this place and from this block and from this continent. And so, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to keep tracking that as we do that. But you've shared some interesting numbers. And Mr. Serrado, I want to come back to these numbers because, again, we're talking trade and we're hearing today that that is tracking towards 30% if we look at trade within the block. My question to you is not so much around how we've gotten there. I'm more interested in how we're going to increase that trade. If we're going to meet this aspiration of really driving the next wave of growth, we've got to increase the trade. How are we going to do it?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. It is always a pleasure to be in the great city of Johannesburg. Very welcome, and a special thanks to our chair from the South African chapter. Well, in terms of the future, it's very important that we state that the BRICS Business Council is a very strong organization, has built a very profound work in identifying intra-BRICS sector networks. So we have promoted trade missions, we have worked on showcase investment projects within the BRICS nations. So this is part of the tasks that we undertook to bring us where we are. We have adopted a trade and investment promotion statement, which is a plan of action for the next 10 years. This obviously includes enhancing balance of trade through bilateral agreements, to the exploration of value chains opportunities. So it's very important to say that when you see the BRICS Business Council work, we are not only on bold free trade statements, we go into the supply chains and we identify specific opportunities of integration, and I'll come back to that later on. And again, we are not only talking about intra-BRICS trade, we are talking about intra-BRICS trades, but for example, also with the African continent as well. We are also developing a BRICS calendar for trade and investment promotional events, because we understand that the B2B work that is undertaken under these environments are extraordinary in terms of promoting business and investments. And just to give one example of the sectorial issues that we've been discussing, I don't want to give any spoilers on the recommendations to the head of states, but taking the field that we work at Embraer, we have proposed what we call an airlift strategy. An airlift strategy will be a comprehensive plan to make sure that we have air connection between the BRICS countries, because without air connection, there is no flow of passengers, there is no flow of tourism, that negatively impacts the tourism, it affects cargo, it affects particularly the business people who are traveling, promoting business, investing, and doing trade. So this is a comprehensive plan, and we are going to drill down the problem into identifying inclusive city pairs that could be served by regular flights to foster that strategy. So that's just an example trying to respond to your questions on what we foresee without having any spoilers on the recommendations to the head of states. Okay?
No, you've done a fantastic job, Mr. Sarado. No spoilers, but certainly very good news for all of us as we're listening in, really ensuring that there is air connection amongst the BRICS member states, which I think is fantastic. What you've also said, which I think was really insightful, is that we're not just playing at the surface. We're going into the value chains. We're looking at the supply chains, and that's really enlightening to show the level of work that's going in. Let me then go to Mr. Khatri, and let me come to you, please, sir, with the next question. If we look at the BRICS bloc in terms of the aspirations around economic development within the bloc, where are you seeing the most potential to drive economic development amongst the member countries?
Ну, вообще-то, самый главный потенциал, он в самом простом, в человеческих отношениях. 10 лет назад я не мог себе представить даже, что встречу людей с самых разных концов нашей планеты, которые станут моими друзьями, партнерами по дискуссиям, по тому, что мы делаем в рамках БРИКС. Вот рядом со мной сидит Анвар Канвар, во втором ряду сидит господин Мацепа. Это те люди, с которыми мы 10 лет назад подписывали учреждение делового совета БРИКС. Ну, как вы видите, отношения наши сохранились, они просто сохранились. Я уверен в этих людях. Надеюсь, что они также уверены во мне, что на любой вопрос, на любую просьбу каждый из нас откликнется. Это маленький пример из того, что мы пытаемся вместе все создавать. Прежде всего, человеческие отношения. Они идут на разных уровнях. Это президенты стран, премьер-министры, министры, рабочие группы, наши форумы, выставки, конгрессы. Это возможность общаться с друг другом. Это возможность надеяться, посмотреть в глаза и знать,
to see each other in the eye, look in the eye, and to have discussion face to face. Then you can really work on the decisions on different issues and different problems. We might have different opinions and different views, but it's the opportunity to honestly talk to each other. And this, I think, is the biggest potential. If we speak about economy, and it was already mentioned that We hope to reach 30% of the global GDP. Then 2050, BRICS would be dominant, absolutely dominant, and that would be a completely different picture on the global scene. So first of all, we have opportunities not only to work on other countries with which BRICS is working, but we have huge potential within BRICS. A very easy, simple example. So for agriculture is the most important sector in BRICS, and countries we buy 315 billion of agricultural products outside our countries, but only 23% of these 315 billion we buy from each other within the BRICS countries. And I think that's a huge potential in our countries, so to realize that potential within our alliance. So there are lots of opportunities like that. So there is potential, there's huge potential, and the interaction with other countries, especially on the African continent, it's the opportunity like triples even. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Katrian. So two really salient points. One, agriculture as a key sector that we should be looking at. But I particularly loved the opening part of Mr. Katrian's response, where he talks about the importance of the relationships. And that's what is actually going to deliver the economic aspirations that we have within the blocks. Because when we can speak honestly, we can really begin to push in the same direction. Let me then move on to yourself, Mr. Kanwar. You've been associated with the BRICS Business Council for the last 10 years. You've seen the group grow, you've seen the group mature. I'd like you to maybe give us a forward look now and talk to us a little bit about how do you see BRICS businesses contributing to the sustainable growth of BRICS member countries?
Thank you very much. Very good question. I think the question you raised is very relevant. In the name of economic growth, we've been abusing nature. And that is what is happening. And nature is giving a revenge, coming up with, you have fires, floods, global warming. All these things are happening because we've not bothered. We've just been busy pushing economic agenda. So I think time has come now. There'll be no tomorrow. You see, now it's question everybody knows. We have to use fossil and renewable energy. You know, there are a lot of industries, especially steel, aluminum. Unless special efforts are done, little is being done, but a lot is desired to be done so that this emission, you know, is removed, because they are the one which is maximum emitting carbons. You know, so it's has to have the low carbon. Everybody knows it, but yet actions are not being taken. Now on the water also, 20th century is going to be a big challenge for not only for the planet as a whole. We have to make sure how we make sure the water is reused. Now, there is agriculture. How do we have sustainable? So there we have to see how we can have drip irrigation.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, in the drip irrigation, we should treat, we have, how do we make sure that this, we prevent post-harvest. There's a burning of these butts, and that again emits a lot of emission, So it's very important we should do that. Now on the urban center also, we should, water harvesting, rainwater harvesting. This has to be done at every level, at every home. And I think this is happening in a big way in India, but I'm sure other countries are also following these things. Because like I said, water is going to be a very big challenge for the planet as a whole. And that is going to be, you have everything, but you will have no water.
Yeah.
So it's very important to address that. And then apart from that, we have to have collaborative efforts from each other. Conclusion is, if we don't do these things, then ultimately, we will be, for our grandchildren, will feel that they will feel not proud, but they feel that they will be ashamed of us. So it's very important to make our grandchildren, future generation, to feel so that we are able to leave something in terms of the planet, you know, the abuse which we have been doing, and we've been seeing the effect all over the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanwa. Mr. Kanwa says, urgency, the time is now. There is no tomorrow. Let our grandchildren not be ashamed of the actions or the inaction that we might have chosen in our time. Thank you very much for highlighting, of course, renewable energy sources, which we'll talk about in the just transition conversation a little bit later, but also the urgency around action around water. And thank you for taking us all the way back to our households, because that's where the micro decisions are taking place. Mr. Zhang Shuagang, let me come to you, sir, in this first round of questions. How do we go about unleashing the trade and investment potential that sits within the BRICS bloc? And how do we create even more opportunities that we have for more economic and trade cooperation? How do we do that? Maybe give us some insights.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, I would like to join my previous panelists in thanking you for inviting me to be here to attend this very important discussion. To answer your question, I would like to say, you know, as a lot of panelists and also the minute mentioned that the BRIC countries enjoy a very powerful economic weight in this world. We account for nearly 40% of the total population and account for 25% of the GDP and also nearly 20% of global trade, which already demonstrate the strength of BRICS countries in this world. And I would also like to say, since its inception, the trade and investment cooperation has always been in the core of our collaboration. And after the pandemic, I believe it is the right time for us to think about how to redirect our direction for the future collaboration. I think maybe three issues we need to pay more attention. The first issue is the policy coordination. You know, we are the emerging market, we are the emerging economies, we are the representatives of developing world. I think we need to have some kind of better policy coordination so that we can make our voice wider, louder, and also we can always generate the synergy. So along this line, I believe something like to keep our market open, to support the trade and investment liberalization and facilitation, to support the multilateral trading system embodied by the WTO, to fight against the protectionism, so on and so forth. Those are the very important policy elements. If we can always keep mind for those policy elements, I think we can ensure we will move in the same, similar, and the right direction. So this is the first point I want to highlight. The second point is the practical cooperation. And actually, from the very beginning, the BRIC countries always organize a lot of business events on a yearly basis. Even for the last year, we organized a lot of trade fairs, investment promotion event, and also the business forum like this one. So I believe those practical activities have proven very effective, and it's warmly welcomed by our business people because our business people can find trade opportunity to find their investment partner for their future collaboration. So I think those sort of, although it's very traditional, but it is very useful. We have to keep the momentum for those pragmatic activity among the BRIC countries. And if we can invite more, for example, our African country, African friend, to take part in further. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And the third point, I think, is that maybe it is the right time for us to consider to elevate our institutional collaboration, cooperation. Why I mention this point? Because when I moved into this meeting hall, I heard a lot of terminology about